responses. And Flo, you're up. You ready to go?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right.
Do you hear me?
Then it's all yours. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to my talk, Words, How to Effectively Deploy Text. So I'm Florencia Minuzzzi, though I usually go by Flo, and I've been making games about conversation for about 5 years now. So I want to share a bit of what I learned from writing and creating user interfaces, or UI, for various different text-heavy games. And I've only got 5 minutes, so I'm going to be rushing through and doing some technical stuff, so I apologize in advance. So to start, a quick overview of why it's worth figuring out the best way to deploy your text. I'm going to talk about deploying text in 3 different sections. First of all, what you do with the words themselves, then what kind of effects you use to make the words stand out, and then what you're doing with your text UI. The important thing is to make conscious decisions about your text. So I'll be giving you a couple of things to think about, but at the end of the day, you need to figure out what's right for your game. So first, why is this important? Well, hopefully this is an easy sell, but in text-heavy games like visual novels, players are going to be spending a lot of time reading, so the reading experience is really important. We want to make things as smooth as possible for them, but ideally we also want to make the reading experience interesting, if we can. So let's start by thinking about the words themselves. This seems like really simple stuff, but start by thinking about the size of your text. You want text large enough that it can be read comfortably, but you still want to make sure that your screen doesn't feel crowded. And maybe that means displaying less text per panel, but that way it might be easier for players to take it in. Of course, you have to strike a bit of a balance. You don't want players to have to mash the spacebar, but a couple extra button presses might make the whole experience better. Similarly, you want the font to be easy for players to read, but you can still choose one that matches your game's atmosphere. There are sites like Google Fonts that have tons of free options for you to play around with and find the one that's best. So now that you have something that's nice and easy to read, you can think about adding little flourishes. So you can add personality to your characters by giving them different fonts, for example, as long as the game as a whole still feels coherent. So here's a quick example of changing the font size and color to make your text more legible. Unfortunately, some of the text is out of the text box, but hopefully you'll get the idea that the one on the left is a little bit hard to read. The colors kind of blend in. There's a lot of text in there, whereas the one on the right, you have less text. We've only put in 1 sentence, but it's easy to read. Here is an example, hopefully you can see this GIF, from the game Undertale, where they use different fonts and capitalization for different characters. And this serves as a pretty good shortcut to show the differences in personality between the 2 characters. Right, so now that we have kind of our base words, we need to show them to the player in the best way possible. And this involves things like animations. So for example, fading words in or out can make the transitions easier on the eyes. You also want your text to be located front and center if you can. Probably not actually front and center because you're doing a visual novel and you probably have nice art. But you want to make sure that you allocated enough space that it doesn't feel like an afterthought in a corner of the screen. Also, when it comes to how the words appear, think about the needs of your game. You can show all your text box at once, like a lot of visual novels do, and this gives players a lot of time to read through all of your text. But on the other hand, if you roll your words in a bit at a time, it might feel more like a character is talking to you. So let me show you what I mean. Here's an example of text coming in from the game Restless that I helped work on. The words come in one at a time, but still relatively fast. And there's a bit of a longer pause whenever you have punctuation, which kind of imitates the way we talk in real life. Pyre does something similar, but their text comes in a little bit differently. Take a second to watch how it comes in, and you'll notice that the fade it's quite nice. It's a nice, pleasant fade. And if we pause it while it's halfway through, you can see what's happening. The words start out, when they come in, as a lighter color, which then gets darker, almost as if it's kind of burning onto the paper. It's a nice, satisfying fade. All right, so just like your font, text effects can add a lot of character to something. And they can be used especially well if you don't have voice acting. It really helps you convey a character's tone and personality. So have a bit of a quick look at these 2 characters from Wondersong here. just by looking at the way they're talking, you don't need to know anything else. You don't need any sound effects. The dancing rainbow words are really speaking for themselves. And when it comes to text effects, you don't need to, you can do text effects for one line, for a whole paragraph, or just for one word if you really want to emphasize that. And lastly, I want to talk about the UI for your text. So let's start with the text box. As before, you're trying to get as much legibility and personality as you can. You end up with something that's high contrast, but still with a strong flavor. Maybe you can consider framing it as part of your game story, if that fits. So for example, your text box might look like a letter being written in your medieval game, or text being typed on a computer for a more modern game. This is also a good place to think about indicating speakers. I sometimes can't tell who's speaking in a visual novel. A name tag is not always enough. Is there something else you could do to set speakers apart, maybe using the UI or the text itself? Can you at least distinguish between the narrator and speaker text? You want reading to go smoothly, so players don't have to scroll back and figure out who said what every time you have a conversation. And when it comes to the text options, the kind that's pretty standard in visual novels, which we've seen earlier, it helps if they look like clickable buttons or input fields. You don't want players unsure of what to do with all these different words popping up. So as an example, The World Ends With You delivers its text using speech bubbles. These are small, a bit like mobile games, and it makes conversations very rapid fire, which works quite well for their game. The speech bubbles also make it clear who the speaker is because it points at them. And there's multiple speech bubbles on screen at any time, so it helps you keep an eye on the flow of conversation. The changes between narrator and speakers don't have to be very big either. Something small is enough to catch your eye and help you notice the transition between people speaking and the narrator. Here's an example from Pi. Finally, and most importantly, think about your player's experience and make conscious decisions about your text. This is general game design knowledge, but if you know why you did something, you can check whether it had the desired effect or not. And that means that you can tweak your game until you get it just right. So look at other games, see what they do, and learn from them. That's it. Good luck on your games, and thank you for listening.
Awesome. You guys can handle some questions while I hand this off to, who's the next person? Full Tim. All right.